I think what you're saying is important because every person's entry is going to be different and unique to them. And yet I think that there is a commonality. There's some rub, there's some maybe injury or dissonance, didn't feel right. And for others, it's like the crack
Mhm.
is where the light gets in. So for me, I was raised in an alternative manner. I was raised on the road. My mother, they weren't really hippies. My mother was like a rebel. And so we were homeless. I'd ridden across country several times on a motorcycle by the time I was 4.
Wow.
So I just had an alternative lifestyle upbringing on purpose. My mother wanted to create a warrior. She was that. She was a warrior archetype. And I guess the meaning would be that the space between you and real life is nothing. I would say direct experiencing. And so that really led to me just having like eyes wide open to the world and all different shapes and sizes and colors and experiences. I mean, I had huge experiences all of my life.
Mm.
And so I think by the time I really landed where I hadn't really landed, but my mother had sort of settled. And I'll put it to you this way. I was born in Ohio. I had lived in Key West. My mother was a lobster fisherman. So I had lived on a lobster boat as a young, like 2, 3, 4, then in California. So really all over. And then we moved to Alaska, and I shortly went there after. And I was still in high school at the time, so I actually went to Homer High School for a little. And her partner at the time was a Zen Buddhist in the Suzuki Roshi tradition of Zen. And I was like feral. I mean, totally wild. I mean, completely this feral. I mean, I had been working all my life. I worked out on the Homer Spit. And he just kind of took me into this Zen system. So like the first like real book I ever remember reading was Everyday Zen by Yoko Beck. And that changed my life. It was, wow. It sort of put things into context for me where I had maybe witnessed or been a part of a lot of hardship. And I could see like the term is it is what it is. Don't make it a story. Don't make it a thing. It is what it is. You're suffering, your whatever is happening. There's nothing to resist here. And that was, I think, useful for a while. What happened was I left. I moved and he was my teacher. And so I always jokingly say, I got into a lot of trouble with Zen. But I think it was because I didn't have a guide. All I had was this sort of austerity, this hardcore premise of it is what it is. You're suffering, it is what it is. And just sit with that. And later I realized, no, that isn't what it is. That's not actually what it's supposed to be. But I didn't have a teacher and I didn't have a guide. I was doing the best I could. And I did get into trouble quite a bit, actually. A lot of heartache in my 20s. Ended up moving several times, Alaska to California, out and back. And I wound up in Orange County just to finally settle down. And that's when I ran into my next teacher, the yoga
Mm.
teacher, Saddleback. I'll never forget. I was there. Well, my best friend said, you're really into Zen. You're quite spiritual. You should come to yoga with me. And it was at the Self Realization Fellowship. And it was Bikram of all things. I hated it. I was like, why are you yelling at me? But I came home and I enrolled in a yoga class at the local community college. And because I was into Zen, I was always up like really early. And the class was 7 a.m. on a Saturday. And I went and I was like there at like 6. It's ridiculous. I'm sitting there, the room was open, and actually, it was the Aikido room.
Mm.
And I just went in and I'm sitting there and I'm reading my Everyday Zen Yoko Beck book. And here comes this, like, I mean, bald head, it's 60, 70, walks in, this guy walks in and he looks at me and goes, better be careful with that. And I was like, okay. So he changed my life. And what I learned is as I became a teacher and I started training people to be teachers, I sort of had to analyze, what is transference? What is countertransference? And I realized people become your teacher the moment you see something in them that you want, that you want for yourself. And what he had, his name was, I'll put him in the field. His name was Vince McCullough. What he had was joy. And I didn't know joy at all at that time. And so just had a wonderful spirit. It was yoga, but he was doing his teacher was Indra Devi. So it was like elemental yoga and we were spinning the chakras. And at the end, he would do this guided meditation. Years later, I found out it was Yoga Nidra. But he never named it. See, he was so the guru, he never had to put a name on it. You just do it.
Yeah. I love that.
And so then I met in his class a woman. It turned out that he was a student of Osho. And so I met a woman in there. We all went to China together and studied Tai Chi with the Shaolin monks.
Wow.
But yeah, huge, amazing spiritual experience. When I came back, she said, you need to meet my husband. And that became my third teacher. And this person's name was Robert Windorf, and he was non-dualism, Advaita Vedanta. And he could sit there. I would meet with him, once a week. I'd tell him all my stories. And it was just his field that allowed things to transform. And then later, more of the technical education around non-dualism and specifically Advaita Vedanta, because now I've learned the many, many styles. And then my yoga teacher said, well, you need to go teach now. You can't. And I was like, why would I ever teach? I've got you. Why would I ever do that? Because the one thing I always had was humility. I mean, I had seen enough to know that I needed, it's interesting. I work with the young adults that are coming up into yoga or even spiritualism. And to some degree, there's been hardship to some degree that, that crack where we can allow the teachings to come in, but there's been this fall of the guru. And I didn't have that. So for me, being able to fully surrender, like very classical Japanese style, fully give myself to have that prostration, to really be the student and not have to have responsibility for that, that was everything to me. That ritual, the ritual of having a teacher, the ritual of being of service was, for me, so profound. I've always been that way, and I totally understand why maybe that's fallen. I do. I totally get that. So years, I mean, I was with them for, literally physically sitting with them, meditating, practicing, reading, studying, really understanding, breaking things down. 13 years I did that in this very humble way.
I was the most humble. I won the humble award.
That's hilarious. Anyways, well, it felt that way at the time, but I can see now I've turned it around. Anyway, so then I moved to LA and I went to the University of Santa Monica for a master's in spiritual psychology. And this was my next, it was my mother. My mother was like, no, you are going to this program. No, this is this is the program you're going to. And she sort of pushed me to it, and I'm glad. I'm so grateful. They did a whole other level of breaking things down, this intersection between classical psychology, Western, I call it, but it's all over the world, but classical psychology with spiritual context. And that was very profound. And then I guess lastly, I met my husband there on campus. We moved to Austin. I was teaching yoga and somebody said, "Hey, I'm going to do this yoga therapy program." And I thought, first of all, I missed my teachers. I mean, I just did. I was just that type of person that meant a lot to me. And I just missed them so much. And I always felt a little out of place in Texas. So I joined the yoga therapy program. Part of the component of that was we had to specialize. And so I decided I didn't know anything about it. I had never even heard of the person, but Richard Miller was coming to town and leading these integrative restoration, these I-rest yoga nidra trainings. So I specialized in I-rest. And again, it completely transformed me. And I just kept studying. And then he did a training where it was a year long on understanding all of the philosophy. So you start with Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and then you go up to the Bhagavad Gita, and then you go to Advaita Vedanta, and then you go to his system, which is Shiva Shaivism. So then I really got to understand what is non-duality. Like, what is that? And because I had been studying the sutras for so long, I just started to conceptualize it, break it down. And so here I am. And now I'm like, "Oh, wow, I don't know. I feel like I understand at least a
Something. Yeah. Uh,
few years. I mean, I've written big pieces of material on the subject. I actually wrote my thesis called non-dual psychology on the subject. So I think it's like my thing.
Amazing. So when I hear you speak, obviously you have a very sincere soul and you have a real interest and like you're saying, really want to learn and be with teachers and grow and all that. And along the way, you've learned many, many things. And for me personally, I always love getting to the essence of things. Like out of all the stuff you've done, if you really get to the point of, wow, what are really the nuts and bolts of people having inner wellness and integrating mind, body, spirit, however you want to say it? Like, what are the pieces that really allow somebody to be at peace within themselves and feel aligned with the source of life, whatever they like to call that, and be at home within themselves and in the universe? And what are the things that you feel that you've seen consistently for yourself or other people that really are the pillars?
It's not simple. We want to make it simple, and I mean, rightly so. I think the first piece is, from the yoga therapy perspective, a system out of balance will stay out of balance. And so if your sort of life is on fire and you're doing all the things trying to just manage it, just to maintain it, then that is very hard to move to a place of, I mean, so I had somebody say in a training I was doing this weekend, actually, they said, "Well, we just all want to feel a little better." And I thought, if that's the bar, we are in trouble. If that's the bar, we've missed it.
Mhm.
That the bar could be, may my life be vital, vibrant. May I give from a place of force. That could be the bar,
Mhm.
would be a great gift. So it's kind of like which
Mhm.
side comes first. It's hard to create a state change, to live a life where we can physically be healthy so that our mind follows and we can do the work, or working from the mind in, and there's this whole top down, bottom up situation. If I were to speak from a spiritual perspective, and this is the work of spiritual psychology. What they say, and I really love this, they say everything that has happened in our lives has come in and sort of been assigned a value. But the
Uh-huh.
value is based on us, how it relates to us. Well, this thing occurred, and therefore that means about me this. Well, it fit perfectly with the Zen with a little lighter touch, a little
Uh,
sweetness,
mhm.
because this thing occurred, but it actually doesn't mean anything about us. And so the real trick or the real nuance of working with ourselves and why you might see someone or work with someone that understands this is that it's not in, how do I want to say it? It's not about ego attachment. It's not about pushing something away, making something go away, or bringing something in. It's about forgiving ourselves for the way we've come to have an event mean something about us.
Uh-huh.
You see, it's the assessment. The premise is if you really are whole, complete, loved, lovable, worthy, just as you are right now, there's nothing to take away. And so shadow work is really interesting because it literally means that which is in the shadow. But we know when we bring it forward and place it to the light, it's just our wholeness. So when I teach like spiritual psychology, I always say whole means whole. Like your wholeness is your wholeness. You can't just take away. You are innately whole. And then we take these judgments and we put it over us and we say, yeah, well, I would be whole if this. No, 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 no. You already are whole, but you're holding the judgment, which is preventing you from bringing that piece forward for the application of your own loving compassion.
Yeah, to me, and love hearing your perspective on all this, the mental psychological part is on some level to find a place within ourselves that is a present, loving, mature, caring person that can care for all of us. So, with all of our insecurities, our fears, and everything, it can, from a loving and an awareness place, be, oh, yeah, I see this triggers this insecurity or this fear. And that's just part of being a person. And that's okay. I embrace all of it.
Yes.
And I know, like you spoke maybe about Zen. I had a Zen teacher on here recently that shared about his journey. And at some point, he realized that what was missing for him is really embracing emotions and healing. And then he incorporated that into his Zen teachings and nature as well. And so I think it's all how we're processing it. When you were talking about Zen, I know for some people, and I've experienced this, it can seem very austere and very cold. And maybe for somebody at some point that helps get by something. But at some point, it seems that we have to realize that somehow we're part of this miracle and somehow we have the love and the awareness to care for ourselves. And that's a spiritual, mental, psychological experience of embracing ourselves and being able to support others in doing the same and stop the fight. And I know everyone must have their own way of getting there. At some point, I realized like, I don't want to meditate away from things. I want to be fully in life, in the moment, and embrace this miracle and embrace all of me so I can take care of it instead of fighting it or being embarrassed or suppressing it or letting it control me. Just seeing it for what it is from love instead of just saying, this is what is, which is to me another way of just, in some ways, being cold to myself. It's just the way it is. It's just instead of loving and taking care of it. So I think somehow whether it's through therapy or through spirituality or through whatever it is, to somehow be open to embracing us fully. And then the battle stops. Then there's nothing to fight because we
Yeah.
are at peace within ourselves. And I think a lot of times it's like just like trying to run a race. We're running to enlightenment so we don't feel pain, or we're doing all these different things instead of realizing that it's okay. Like we
Yeah.
could take care of it.
I think you're absolutely right. And how you've said it is beautiful. all of those parts live within us, the savior, the persecuted, the victim. And then even beyond the archetypes, our little 5-year-old is still there. The one that had the injury, that experienced the break, still in there. And not to be pushed aside, really, because right along that inner one is also the caretaker and the inner mother or the inner father.
Mhm.
Those archetypes, along with the inner wisdom teacher, they're all there with us. I think it's important, though, not bypass, to not be in such a rush or movement toward the it's all good. The bypass is not the way, is earth school. Your soul has come here to realize its own loving consciousness, and it uses earth's experience to help us find that realization. We can either engage in the curriculum or not, but it's going to keep coming back. And when I teach this, I always say, it's like, you ready? Ready? And there we are. We're like, nope, nope, not ready. How about now? And, it'll just keep. And so typically that's what happens. It just gets so intense. We're sick of dating the same our mother over and over again, or we're having the same experience, that there's finally like, I have to make a change,
Mhm.
and I have to understand this. So in yoga, one of the things that they talk about is that there is a physical system and a physiological system, right? There these 5 sheaths that represent this embodiment. And there's also the way energy sort of facilitates processes, the prana vayus. There are these 5 movements of prana. So one of the movements is digestion. And it's like the way we digest food goes in, goes down, we keep what is useful, and with food, that becomes vitality, and we let go of that useful, right? Well, the brain, the mind has the exact same system, and it's called the limbic system, as you know.
Mhm.
And the limbic system is the digestive system for experience, everything that's coming in through our senses. And it goes into our limbic brain, the emotional center, the memory center of the brain, and it gets digested. So as it gets digested, what is useful, it can break down components to what is useful, that becomes wisdom. So in the body, it becomes vitality. In the brain, experience comes in, gets broken down, that which is useful becomes wisdom, and everything else is let go. We are
Mhm.
able to let go of what's not useful. The problem is that experience comes into the brain, and if that experience is ununderstandable, that the mind cannot actually understand its relevance, how it makes sense, how something could happen, it gets stuck. It gets locked in, and if it's extreme, it literally gets locked into the hippocampus, and we get things like recursive thinking, like flashbacks, PTSD. Like, it literally gets stuck in the hippocampus because it can't understand it. So it's living it over, trying to have it make sense so it can break it down, convert it to either wisdom or to let it go. So that's part of what being, I think, a spiritual scholar or a spiritual seeker can give us, is this ability to see things, to understand our experiences through soul centered eyes, where we begin to understand that it's not despite of us, it's for us.
Mhm.
that we can actually include all of it, the good, the bad, the shadow, the light, and that becomes our superpower. It becomes our essential message. And the Gita, I mean, I just love it. All really comes together because then the Gita says, put your experience in the fire to the altar that you heat.
Mhm.
Let that be your sacrifice because you are here to be. I mean, of course, it's the Gita, so it's going to be like he and me. You are here to be a servant of me. It is to say in another way that all of our purpose, everyone, we have a purpose, and it's to take that message and put it into the world in a way that can be of service in the smallest way, in the biggest way, in the way that is unique to each person.
Uh-huh.
Because the way I'm of service is not going to be what's right for somebody else. But it doesn't mean that they're not important. They are. Every soul is here to convert their experience into wisdom so that they can give it to the world. Every person. I do believe that.
I'm with you. And it seems, again, like I try to step out of all the religions and systems and just try to get the essence of them again. So it seems in some ways everyone needs a way or ways to connect to that wisdom or that clarity or that love that you're talking about. And so whether it's prayer, meditation, nature, different ways, whatever it may be,
Whatever it may be.
finding ways to know yourself as something more than just your thoughts and your stories and your body and your feelings.
That's right.
But then not feeling like to be spiritual that you have to drop your ego and all that, because that's just a battling the reality of what is instead of embracing what is.
That's right.
So I think that's super important for all of us to find different ways and even to be free enough to be like, okay, well, in this moment, what's going to help me connect the most to this love or this awareness? And then also, I think it's very important. I think the body, as you do a lot, and the breathing and the mind, the brain, of ways of people dealing with all this stuff. Because one thing is stuff that's already happened of how it's in our bodies or our minds or our breathing. So that's already happened, and how do people work with that? And then all the new things are happening. So if all the new things are happening and you're identified with being less than or damaged or whatever it may be for each person, then you're living life through that. And so how do you see that as far as people learning to connect to this deeper place in themselves, people learning to use their breathing, their body, their mind to heal the past, and then being able to process in a way that may feel more whole or more authentic or more integrated?
When we started, I said, it's hard when a system is out of balance. It's a little like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have a place to sleep, you can't eat. You're not trying to realize and not
Mhm.
do it. You're just trying to like get warmer, I guess, and cool in
Yeah.
Texas. So I think it's important that we not minimize that. And maybe it's not as essential as like a roof, like Maslow's first layer, or it could be just a matter of psychological safety,
Mhm.
not being in a different relationship or whatever is taking us out of a resonant state. So attending to the body,
Mm.
creating that state change for somebody. They can create state change, they can find a meeting or do something like that. So we can, beyond that, go anything that connects us to our body, anything that connects us to our body. Go for a run, go to yoga. And actually, Richard Miller did this neuroscience study on yoga nidra with severe PTSD, so veterans of war. And what he found was that when you took someone and you just put them into what he calls felt sense sensation, can you feel your hands? Can you feel your arm? Can you feel your leg, your head? Can you feel your mouth, your eyes? That as you hold on just felt sense sensation, the brain starts to fire differently. In particular, the hippocampus fires, the amygdala turns down, the prefrontal cortex turns on. There's all these changes that occur just from felt sense sensation. And then with that, there are qualities. So I really love to talk from the level of qualities because we can all relate to it.
Mhm.
So the qualities associated with that is perspective, a sense of timelessness, spacelessness, a sense of being connected to each other. And so we know that if we get into a felt sense state and we can hold ourselves there, we can actually shift our brain's ability to move from a sympathetic response to a parasympathetic, from fight, flight, freeze to rest and relaxation. We can shift that. Now, if I said to someone whose life's on fire, well, just feel your hand. I mean, they're going to go screaming for the door. So things like going for a run or doing yoga, martial arts, anything where they can get into their bodies, even the intensity of it is going to begin that process because the digestive system, whether it's in the gut or in the brain, it only digests when we're in a relaxation state. So there's no chance of
Mhm.
really breaking down those experiences until we can start to shift our state, make that state change. So, absolutely. Even Patanjali's like, look, be nice to your neighbor, be nice to yourself, do your physical practices, do your energetic practices, boom, 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 sense
Mhm.
withdraw. And, but there's a reason why the breath work is after the physical. At least from my perspective, they're all meant to build on each other. So I'm not into bypassing, it's like get into the body, yeah, do some breath work and we can do the box breathing and all those things, purse lips, exhale, trying to hack the system. But at the end of the day, it's a whole system.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mentioned this a few times. I heard in Japan, whether it's true or not, that there's not like mind, body, spirit. It's just one. And to
It's a
see
whole.
it, and we can play with the body, the breathing, the brain, different things, but ultimately it's all integrated as one. And the body and the brain are the same. I mean, it's whatever your brain's thinking, your body's feeling, and your body's feeling, your brain's thinking is just they're totally in cahoots. Even what I do for work with movement, it took me a long time to realize that you can intentionally use your body to go deeper into spirituality instead of just like, oh, I'm exercising or I'm releasing energy or whatever. But it's actually one of the most incredible ways to enter spirituality and to be open to enter spirituality.
To me, it was the way.
Yeah.
It was the way to be in those yoga classes. And they were nothing. I mean, it was beginner, but then to just drop in, no, it to go through the body for me, at least, that had to be the entry.
Yeah.
And like you
Great.
said, there are many paths, many paths. It could be bhakti, where you're chanting, where it's coming this way. There, it could be jhana, study. That's also been a huge part, although I've always had that physical side. I'm not really a fan of the altered breath practices that are out there right now.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I try to always be open. And then when I have reactions, I ask, why and all that. But somehow in my mind, I feel like the love, the awareness, all of that, it's right here. Like we just have to rest into it. We don't have
Just
to do
even
it.
hacking.
Yeah. And so I could see the intense breath. Maybe it's like bursting your way through something. So then you feel like you can relax. But after doing it, like you're saying, knock, knock, you come back to right here.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I don't judge either. I always just say, hey, we're all doing the best we can. We're all trying to find our way. And if somebody feels a little bit better from it, great.
Mhm.
Ultimately, it's like that very first Bikram class I ever took. Hopefully, it just leads us to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just always that. School's in session. It's Earth curriculum. And you're right. At USM, I'm looking over here because I have my USM, my cup, but they have the goal line and the soul line. And I often teach this people, this Earth curriculum, this is the goal line and the soul line's just wanting to go up. So every time we hit that rub, we hit that dissidence or the injury, that's this opportunity to level literally up. And where soul is going is to the only non-dualized experience. Richard Miller, like non-dualism, Advaita Vedanta, Shiva Shaivism, Ramana Maharshi, even Patanjali, who was a dualist, he says, yeah, but the dualism is taking you to non-dualism. But it's like everything is a paradox. Everything has two sides. You have light, you have dark, you have hungry, you have full. Everything has its opposite. We live in a world of opposites. Everything does, except for one thing, and that's loving. Loving is the only thing that has no opposite, and it's a field. And so then I like to clarify, it's not love, the verb to love, because love has an opposite. Would you agree?
Mhm.
If you can love, you can.
Hate.
That's right. It has an opposite. So the verb, but the field of loving, the noun, the field of loving, it has no opposite. We just may be more or less awake to it, more or less able to apply it. USM has another saying. They say healing, which, by the way, the etymology, the word heal, it means to make whole again, which I just love. So healing, to make whole again, is the application of loving to the places inside that hurt. Isn't that beautiful?
Beautiful. Very beautiful.
So this wholeness that we're all out there wanting to seek and find, like as if it's not here. Well, if
Mhm.
I, for whatever I do,
Yeah, yeah.
and yet it's just to apply our own loving consciousness to all of the parts that have been disenfranchised. And the sword of their disenfranchisement is the judgment we made about the experience. And this goes all the way back to the very first thing, that I've somehow assessed something that was bad. So this is where the non-dualism comes in. That was bad. That was good. That was wrong. That was right. That was ugly. All of that paradox. And we put it back in the shadow. But when it comes knocking, you ready yet? Because it's coming through as life experience. You see, that shadow is speaking in psychological terms. That's exactly what we would say, is that the shadow's driving the neuroses, it's driving our perception. And so, but in spiritual psychology, they're saying it's there to awaken you to your own loving consciousness. At the time, we couldn't understand the experience, so we
Mhm.
assessed it, which is the role of the ego. How does this relate to me? What does it mean? Well, that didn't feel good, so obviously I'm not good.
Mhm.
And that little assignment went in, and it keeps knocking. Are you ready to resolve this? Are you ready to include me in your own
Mhm.
heart? To understand that that was just experience. This is the Zen, that it was just experience, but it has no statement, no stand on your wholeness, no stand on your lovability. And when we wrap that part, that little one, that whatever, when that injured one, when we wrap that one in the arms of our own loving compassion, it transforms within us.
Mhm.
Yeah, it transforms within us, and we gain its power, and it becomes more of our own wisdom power, our own story.
That's right on. So for you personally, or when you're working with people, how do you help people learn to connect with that or to be aware of that or to embrace that in themselves?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a great question. And for me, I would say I have had really incredible teachers. It's not just spiritual psychology, it's yoga therapy, it's yoga, it's non dualism. And so education just gives people a framework to understand that these concepts, if you were to just roll it out right away, it would be like, well, anybody but me. Of course, that's okay for all them. I'm the one that's really bad.
Yeah, it's not gonna work for me because that assignment, like you said, I've been assigned as the bad student.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so you just roll out perspectives. You slowly are creating a state change. You're supporting a healthy lifestyle. You're supporting like pattern change, also, I think is important. So you take a look at the pattern and then the capacity, that mindfulness capacity of like, look, you don't have to make the pattern wrong. You can just decide if it's useful or not.
Yeah, yeah. And understand it. If you're like, oh wow, that pattern came because I felt insecure and afraid and I was trying to prove something. And actually I don't need to prove anything or whatever it is to get to understand that it's not necessarily the boss.
Well, and it's not bad, and that's one of the things we do in the spiritual psychology work is, like, every single thing we've done, every coping mechanism, every numbing mechanism, everything we've done has served us in some way. That actually it was there as protection that we needed. And in fact, it was a great gift. And so part of it is really being able to turn to these habits, rituals, patterns and say, thank you so much for the way that you or that pattern has been of service. And I'm growing now. I'm changing now. I have more capacity now. It may be useful at some point, but right now, I'm gonna choose something else.
Uh-huh.
So even that, so we can take the sharp edge
Uh-huh.
off even the way we judge how we've just survived this. It's okay, we're okay. When I work with someone, that's it. It's like listening for the dualism, listening for the paradox, the way people judge things themselves, trying to take the sharp edge off of it and guide, like in yoga therapy, they say, well, you never take away, you always add. So you're going to go for a run in the morning, which means decide if you really want to have that bottle of wine.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. No,
Ye-
it's yeah, I can relate to that a lot too. I always find that instead of me fighting something, if I
Yes.
bring something beneficial, it helps in the mix of not making that one thing so powerful because I'm adding something that I know is going to serve me. And then I can look at that thing in a healthier way as opposed to fighting myself about it, which is very difficult.
And it's like we all have something and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, it's still this human experience. It's progress. And I think also just this last part of like being gentle with ourselves while we go through and really understanding that, especially if anyone's listening that's really going through a hard time, to know that the door doesn't shut once it opens. The light comes through and it does not go back. So every little bit, every little step, it doesn't go away. You're on the right path. Already you're here. Look at you. I was saying, look at
Uh,
you. You're already here. Look at you.
so, with that for you, and again, with working with people, when stuff really comes up in the moment, when you're feeling majorly triggered by a pattern in your life or whatever it is in real time, how do you or you help people work with that so they can take care of it even though they're in a deep reactive state?
I think the first part is that just for me, I'm not a licensed therapist and I
Yeah.
don't even claim to be.
Mm.
There's really clear sort of scope. And my husband, who is a licensed therapist, we know what the scope is. So part of my scope is I really don't get into history. Someone might relate a story, but I'm not really equipped or doing that type of work. So where I would support is give alternative paths. And I've often said the time of change is the hardest part. Just go to bed.
Hey, that's helpful, right?
You know what? It has been
Yeah.
extreme.
It's healing, yeah.
I've worked with people with like extreme eating disorders, severe PTSD, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Really at that crucible, that intense time, again, it's not to make it right or wrong. It's just go to bed.
Mhm.
You are baking, you're being cooked.
Yeah, yeah.
Heal,
Mhm.
listen to whatever you want, watch a TV
Yeah.
show. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Tomorrow is another day.
Yeah, and doing that, again, it is a gentle thing because you know that sleep is healing. And so if you're like, "Hey, you know what? Putting myself to sleep right now is a very kind, caring thing to do to rest."
Just be tender. Allow that tenderness to do its job. Be tender, go to bed, get a bowl of popcorn, watch a movie. Stay there. When I was working with my spiritual teacher, I would sometimes cry and I would be like, when is this going to be over? And he would go, ha ha ha, you'll cry until the last tear falls. And it's so true. And it's true about the story. We have to tell our story. We have to tell it over. And you tell your story until the story's done being told. It just doesn't become important anymore. What remains is the vibrant impact
Mhm.
that it was meant to give you, your wisdom story. And it's so funny, Jonathan, for years, I identified as a warrior. I mean, I had warrior shirts and I was just like,
Yeah.
run. And it's so funny now here,
Yeah.
I don't so much anymore. I know that's within me, but I
Yeah.
feel more like my teacher. My very first teacher, I feel more of that, like what he had, joy.
See that? A
Yeah,
lightness. That's one thing that I feel when people are tickled by the divine, or whatever someone wants to call it, and they've come to peace with the stuff. There's a lightness, there's a joy, there's a flow, and there's an isness because there's nothing to prove or to push or pull. It's just right here, loving,
yeah,
loving all of herself, loving all of others. And that doesn't mean agreeing or this or that. It just means being in a state of love that can embrace all of it, take care of all of it. I think that is ultimately what we all want, whether we know it or not, and whether we have a path or not yet, to feel that in us that just wants to love. And when we love, we're being loved. And I think it's
yeah,
really super powerful.
yeah.
So the thing I wanted to ask you is when you go into like a very deep spiritual place or you feel freer and you feel like joy, it seems that we all find something in the world that feels right for us to be doing. And that may change in time. I know some people may have this clarity and this vision of, I'm going to do this thing. And then they take the steps to do it. In my experience, it's always been more of what's in front of me. I do my thing, and then all of a sudden something else opens up and it expands, and then I do that. And then it just feels like this unfoldment. When I look at it, it all seems like this thing that was always unfolding on the inside on some level of being who I am and what I've always felt inside, like pulled to be or do on the outside somehow, but it hasn't been something planned in that way. But I'm curious for you, and I know you share with me briefly about this full circle of where you started and where you are today in your profession. How do people take this clarity on the inside and allow them to fully live on the outside? And it doesn't matter if what they feel they're meant to be doing, but just they're doing something that feels like they can fully express their inner freedom in the world and doing good with it. Have you have a process for that? Have you seen ways that people have gotten clear, not only on the inside, but then taken it into the world of what they're going to do with their life?
I mean, as you were sharing, I was thinking That's very Taoist of you. I don't know. People come with all kinds of mental complications
Mhm,
that prevent the ease of, well, I'll follow over here and then
mhm,
that, I'll follow over here and all these, well, I should, or I started this path, or some imprint, the residue of some expectation. So I'm not really sure how to answer your question except to say that the Bhagavad Gita, it gives us some clarity on this point. And essentially it says your role is really to clear all of that out. Like the yoga is to get out of your own way, so to speak.
mhm,
And that when you do, you will be a conduit for me. That is our role. Our role is to clear, meaning to meditate, to listen and follow. Tune in, listen and follow. Those are the three things of the Gita. Tune in, sit down, listen, and then do what you hear. And that's a little bit of what you're saying is like there's this intuitive movement. And of course, we know like Arjuna on the battlefield, there's like, I don't want to, I don't do all these things. So he says, when you can clear the field, when you can clear and you can become a conduit, you will know you are on the right path because certain things begin to happen. You will have synchronicity. You will have feelings of deja vu. Good fortune will come into your life. The right people, the right place at the right time will happen. You'll get signals along the way that you
mm,
are going in the right direction. And the Gita says, likewise, when you are not on the right path, you will also get signs. It will feel like a struggle. You will have bad fortune. You will lose money, like he says, like a gambler's debt. You will have injury. You will be sick. You will get all of these roadblocks. You will be like, why do I keep hitting this roadblock? And so the Gita is so wonderful because it tells us, it says, but check it out. You're just not listening. That's
that's beautiful.
just right. And so if we put that into practicality, into life, how many times do we go and we keep beating our why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? Because the alternative, the courage to take the risk to follow that heartfelt desire to follow that inward impulse is so scary that we like Arjuna go through all these maturations. And even the Gita says Arjuna, he was out of breath, he was fainting, he was weak at the knees, he was negotiating with God, like all of these things. And so the lesson of the Gita is, are you doing that? Do you have anxiety? Do you have depression? Are you negotiating? Are you trying to rig the system? And then to follow the path. Like I always tell the story when we moved here to California, I mean, there was no sensible reason for us to make that move. We each had very successful businesses. Our son was in school. We owned a beautiful house that we'd never be able to buy in Austin again. Logically, it made no sense. From me, I wanted to be here. And then suddenly everything just started opening, everything. My husband and I, we looked at each other and I was studying the Gita at this time with Chase Bosar. I always like to say my teachers because I like to give them credit.
Yeah.
I was studying the Gita with Chase Bosar and I said, you know what? We don't know what we're going to do. Let's just keep following the sign
Yeah.
until we really know. And we rode that indecision into the sweetest sweet spot. You would not believe it. And then we leaped. And so then the last part is courage. And courage is the hardest part of the spiritual journey. To trust ourselves. But we can be our own best case study. We can be our own best example because look at everything we've been through. And here we are. We just have to acknowledge it.
And I think that's so beautiful because it's resting in to be able to listen, to trust that your insides know. And even if we think we don't know, our insides do. And even if it's just taking one step forward, that's all we know. That one step is going to help us know for the next step.
When I really got the Gita, when I really, really got it, I started just walking around and I would say, rightly or wrongly, this is what I'm doing. Because that's what the Gita says. It says, you have no claim on this experience. It's not yours. This experience is mine, right? But so I would just say, why, rightly or wrongly, this is what I'm doing. And would make these huge decisions, leave studios, stay at studios, this and that thing. And you know what? It was never wrong. Rightly, wrongly, this is what I'm doing. I don't know. It could go in any direction.
Love how you shared about, and now you're a professor and where you started all this and somehow, whether that was a plan or not, it was listening and following. And all of a sudden I could see the joy that it's bringing you this full circle, not only doing where you started receiving, but also feeling similar to your teacher who was doing that there. So what a beautiful, beautiful
Yes.
full circle in that way.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And there were a series of little leaps that on the tail end, I promise you, were not easy. As a matter of fact, were the opposite of easy, very hard. And what do? You just keep going.
It's the courage, right?
Yeah, I mean, what's the choice? I mean, I always say, of all the things, this is not going to be the thing. This was not going to be the thing to take me to.
My wife's cousin did this thing called the world's toughest row, rowing a boat from California to Hawaii. And she was on this team that did the co-ed world championship and
Wow.
set the record. And I was talking to her, actually I had her on the podcast.
Wow.
She was saying, well, I just had to accept there was no plan B. And I was going to be out there for 40 days. And what was I going to make of it? I had to have my mind to be able to make it a good 40 days. And I had to go moment to moment. But she said, I couldn't
Wow.
have a plan B because there wasn't one.
I love that. We're resilient. We're resilient. And the tragedy, the heartache, the injury talks us into believing we're not. But we are. The
Yeah.
enduring spirit, it's within.
Yeah. And I think that when you go through the intensity of things, the capacity to be in the loving and to experience yourself as the loving goes deeper and wider and gets cleaner and more joyful. So, like you were talking about, it's not just to feel better. If we have in ourselves, like, I want to experience loving as my state of knowing myself, then the willingness to go through anything because there's nothing like knowing yourself as loving. Again, when we talked before, you mentioned about having something, adding something, or having something bigger than the thing. Well, if we know loving is the reward for being ourselves, then when we feel off track or whatever, the joy of coming back is so special.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. That's right.
I'm thankful that we've had this time and that we've reconnected after so many years. And I love seeing that you're shining and glowing with what you're doing. And I could so relate to that. I always celebrate seeing people finding their inner way and their outer way and sharing it so fully. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I know, you too, Jonathan. I just can't believe it. Yeah, it's been really amazing, really fantastic all these years.
it's so special too in this podcast. I know you from my past. And so you're not somebody I've never met before, but it's not like we hung out a lot. I mean, your child came to my school and I knew, you were doing your work and I was doing my work. And then to sit here and have this like soul to soul conversation of like, hey, what's up? What's your journey like? And to have so many samenesses, but completely different and just really special. And whether I know somebody like I've known you from before or someone I don't know, it just all feels so the same.
Well, it's
So the
all
love.
going to the same right, it's all going to the same place.
It's so
Yeah,
beautiful. The last guy I had, or 2 guys ago, he was a Zen teacher. Somehow when he said this, I've heard it so many times about there's only one of you. And I was like, whether it's true or not, I really heard it of like really embrace fully being you because that's the opportunity we have. Even if there's more people just like me, there's something so me that why not fully embrace what I've been given and express fully and celebrate that, even with all the quirks and this and that. It's like, no, this is my unique expression that's been given to me. And so how do we freely be that and try to serve love? So I love seeing so many beautiful people doing that. So thank you
that's
for
amazing
you
what you're
doing that.
doing. Yeah, it's incredible what you're doing.
And I feel so thankful. It's so funny how this whole thing happened because it wasn't people have heard this so many times, but I never wanted to do a podcast. I never planned on doing a podcast, but I had a full circle moment with an author who started my seeking, Dan Millman, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. That book really affected me. And somehow he and I connected. We had a long conversation. And I said, hey, do you want to do a podcast? He goes, no, but if you do it, I'll be your first guest. It'd be an honor. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do
I
that, you know?
know, see,
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, being led.
Yeah, so it was so incredible, and then from that, I have this connection now, but it was like out of college in New York City crying, reading this book and calling him on the phone and asking him to be my teacher, and then having this whole, whatever, 30 years later or something, reconnecting and having this relating, so it's really beautiful.
That's great. Amazing.
Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you again.